The best of downtown from 7 to 8 a.m. on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket and 929theticket.com. This is the best of downtown.
And a good Sunday morning, the 10th day of August. Welcome into the best of downtown Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket, 929theticket.com. Rich Kimball, Brian Stackpole here with you. Some good stuff from the week that was. We'll hear from Bob Ryan of the Boston Globe, college football expert Phil Steele, WEEI's Rob Bradford talks Red Sox, plus NFL talk with Vinnie Iyer of the Sporting News, and Comcast Eric Frede with us as well. As we get rolling, busy weekend, Senior Little League World Series underway today with the first game. Don't forget to tune in at high noon as Bangor takes on Canada here on The Ticket. And, of course, broadcasts of the tournament all week long on Sports Radio 92.9. Let's get our best of show rolling this morning with the great Bob Ryan, who joined us this week, even though he was pretty busy doing double duty, filling in on ESPN's Pardon the Interruption. But he took time out from that to join us and talk about the recent Red Sox fire sale.
Well, I mean, it's in response to you can't, if you have any background at all in the situation, if you have any prior knowledge, you can't say, I don't get it. You clearly understand it, what it is. You may not like it. You may not agree with the actual implementation, who they got in exchange for the players they gave up, and that's fine. That's baseball. That's legitimate. But to scratch your head about what's going on, it's obvious. 2014 is over, and they are maneuvering for 2015 and beyond. That's all. And that was a month ago. We were all asking the same question: are they buyers or sellers? There was still a hope that a second half surge could put them in the wild card discussion. But we found out quickly after the All-Star break that was not to be, and the decision was made to break up the team.
Is there any chance, or is it just a fantasy, that John Lester could forget what went on back in the spring or what didn't go on and come back to this team next year?
I don't see anything other than the most remote chance, because it's a policy that has sent him away is not going to change in the next 3 months, is it? John Henry is on record. He doesn't want to extend long-term contracts to pitchers over 30 at big money. I mean, we're not talking about setup men. We're talking about aces that command $20 million and beyond, which they didn't offer him. They offered him a fifth, and they didn't refute this published report, or reports plural, that they offered him 4 years, $70 million, which isn't even $18 million a year, and it's a minimum of 20, and that's that. So, what makes anybody think that John's going to change his mind in January and do something that he wasn't willing to do in last March or last week? So I don't see any chance he's coming back.
Bob Ryan, columnist emeritus of the Boston Globe, joining us here on Downtown. You had a terrific column in the Globe Sunday ranking the top Red Sox lefties of all time. Glad to see Dutch Leonard get some due in there, along with Lester, Lefty Grove, Mel Parnell, and number one Babe Ruth. What was the response from readers?
Oh, it was the funny thing, that the response that intrigued me and scared me when I first looked at it. I said, oh, my God, did I really? And that was, where's Smokey Joe Wood? Well, of course, Smokey Joe was right-handed.
Right.
Thank God. And I was 99% certain he was right-handed, and I thought I had researched adequately and done my homework and made sure I didn't make a colossal error of that nature. But had I made that error, it would have been terrible, because obviously Smokey Joe Wood would have to be on that list as a left-hander. But he was right-handed. I didn't expect it to provoke enormous response. I just wanted to have a little light reading provided for people. My thought was this: here I am, I'm writing on Sunday in the aftermath of the wheelings and dealings last week, and all our experts, our Peter Abrahams and our Dan Shaughnessy's and our Nick Cafardos, they were going to be weighing in on the as and wherefores of the deal, and I just thought I'd go in a different direction and provide some fun light reading. And it worked out fine. And one thing that I did hear from my good friend Gordon Eads, who now writes, of course, for ESPN.com, is the modern metrics that are available that were not available when you're just looking up the numbers of a guy like Mel Parnell show that Lester. There's a very, very good argument to be made to rank Lester ahead of Parnell, and numbers that, quite frankly, I didn't consider. So that's okay. But nothing's going to change 1 and 2, Ruth and Grove.
No doubt about that. Let's talk about the NBA. Of course, lots of movement here in the offseason. How is that substantially, or has it substantially changed the power structure of the NBA, particularly in the East?
Well, it certainly has changed the East because now Cleveland is a favorite. Cleveland, Chicago are clearly the 1-2 favorites and with some order to win the East now because as a result of what's happened. And that presupposes that Derrick Rose translates what he's doing right now on the USA team into the regular season. He's looking terrific, as everybody that has seen him will tell you. So, but the West, interesting. San Antonio still has to be the favorite. You still have 9 or 10 good teams and only 8 spots. I think that with the off season has helped the East get better in relation to each other, but not necessarily in relation to the West. I think it's going to be tremendous competition for playoffs in the East now, and but I don't think that and we still have anywhere near as many good teams as we have in the West.
Last time you were on, you told us you didn't see any way the Celtics could come up with a package that would be enough to pry Kevin Love out of Minnesota. It sure looks like Cleveland may be the only ones that could do that. So with that in mind, is the rebuilding project of Danny Ainge going to take a little longer than expected?
Oh, sure. Well, I never thought Love was a viable thing anyway, so it's not for me. It won't be any longer than expected. It'll be what I expected, and I don't expect them to have any great chance of making the playoffs this coming year. Now, always somebody is better than you think, and someone regresses. So somewhere there'll be a team that I see almost 7 locks in the East. None of them are the Celtics, and that doesn't include the Knicks or the Nets. So that's how way I see the East. A lot of teams have gotten better. But the Celtics, and I don't know. I think they'll win more games than they did last year, but they're still not going to be in the hunt. No, their future, their prognosis is still long range for sure.
When last we spoke, you were just finishing doing the audio recording for the book. When's the publication date?
Publication date is October 7th, and all the run-up stuff's out there, the pre-orders on Amazon and all that, which are very heartening. I'm working with a publisher, Spray Publisher, that has much different than anyone I've ever worked with before. I've never been involved in an enterprise this active and this all-encompassing. So I'm very excited about it. But and I'm getting anxious. I mean, it's still 2 full months from the publication. I feel like I started working on it a long time ago. And so it's fresh in my head, and I'm anxious to see the thing see the light of day, if you will. But I still have to wait 2 more months.
And that was Bob Bryant of the Boston Globe talking about the Red Sox, Celtics, and all things Boston sports with us from earlier in the week on Downtown with Rich Kimball. This is the best of Downtown here for this early Sunday morning edition on the 10th day of August 2014. Glad to have you alongside with us for this edition of the program. We've got a lot of great talk, including some football talk coming up after the break. We'll hear with one of the college football experts, and one of the foremost football experts out there. You might have heard him and seen him and read him on ESPN. Also has a tremendous new draft guide, so you should pick it up as well. So we'll check in with Phil Steele after the break and talk a little college football here in just a moment. You're listening to the Best of Downtown here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
Back on the Best of Downtown for this Sunday morning, a previously recorded edition of the show. Rich Kimball and Brian Stackpole here getting ready for the start of college football season. And this week we had a chance to talk to probably the preeminent college football expert in the country. Phil Steele has been producing guides for college football for 2 decades now. We had the pleasure of talking with him on Thursday and congratulated him on 20 years of his college football guide.
You know, it has. And you go back to that first edition of the College Football Preview magazine. It was black and white newsprint. It was less than 200 pages. That current readers may find that hard to believe that I could ever have a magazine less than 200 pages. And that covered basically 88 teams. Now, of course, we're full color, 352 pages. We've got about 3 to 4 times the amount of information any other college football magazine is out there. And, it is hard to believe that it's been 20 years already.
I hurt my back taking it off the shelf at the bookstore, but, man, it's great. It's the Bible for those of us in sportscasting. We love it. The fans love it, and great to have it out there available again this year. Let's start at the top of your preseason top 40. You've got Florida State back at the top. Are they the most complete football team out there as we start the year?
Yeah, Rich, I think this time of year, if you're trying to put in a Final Four bracket, you're going to fill it in pencil in your bracket because it's just the start of August, and there's a lot of the season's about 3 weeks away. But if I'm going to grab a pen for one team out there and go ahead and fill it in my bracket, it's the Florida State Seminoles this year. When you look at Florida State, they are the most complete team. Now, there are 6 teams in the country that rank in my top units in the front of the magazine in all 8 position categories. I'm talking about quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, and defensive backs, as well as special teams. That's no surprise that Florida State's one of those 6. But what is a surprise is that their lowest-rated unit is the running backs, which rate number 12 in the country. When your weakest unit is 12th best in the country, got yourself a pretty good team. All the other units are in my top 10. They are the most complete team. Then factor in that schedule. They only take on my number 46 schedule this year. Yes, Oklahoma State's on the list, but Oklahoma State only has 8 returning starters. Clemson's on the list, but they lose Taj Boyd, their 1,000-yard rusher, top 2 receivers, including Sammy Watkins. Louisville's on the list. They lose Bridgewater and Strong. I actually have Florida State a double-digit favorite in every game this year. I'm pretty sure they're going to be in that Final Four playoffs, the first one ever.
Well, when you talk about your grading of the units, Alabama's looking pretty tough. The number 1 running back unit, number 2 receiver core.
Yeah, and Alabama, really the only question mark I think a lot of folks have about Alabama this year is quarterback play. And, when you look at the quarterbacks, you can't put Jacob Coker quite up there at the top yet. I mean, he is 6'5", he is 235, he is a redshirt junior quarterback, but he hasn't even won the starting job yet, so we've got to get him in there and get the job won. I think he'll do that. But as you touched on, they got my number 1 set of running backs in the country, number 2 receivers, number 8 rated offensive line. Each of their defensive units are in my top 8, and the special teams are rank up there at number 29. And then when you factor in their schedule this year, I don't have them a double-digit favorite in every game, but I do have them favored in every game. The toughest 2 games, toughest 2 road games this year are at Mississippi and at LSU. Neither of them are easy, but I think they've got the talent to win both. They do get that big revenge game against Auburn at home this year. So I do have Alabama favored in all 12 games, and I've got them finishing number 2.
Now, you've got Ohio State at number 3. Do they need a healthy Braxton Miller to make this happen?
Boy, you hit it right on the head, Rich. That's probably my biggest question mark when it comes to Ohio State this year. Not Braxton Miller's play, because he's shown improvement each and every year throwing the football. Last year he was up to 64% completions, 24-7 ratio. With an improved receiving core, I think those numbers get stronger. Running the football has never been a problem. He had over 1,000 yards last year, 6.2 yards per carry. Keeping healthy has been. He's missed portions of each of the last couple of years with injury. And last year they had Kenny Guyton to rely on. Kenny Guyton hit 69%, 14 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions. Well, this year they've got Cardell Jones and J.T. Barrett. Now, I watched both those guys in the spring, and neither blew me away. So I think they need to keep Braxton Miller healthy. The other question mark a lot of folks have with Ohio State this year is that offensive line. They only have 1 returning starter. But when you look at Ed Warnier and the job he did with the offensive line 2 years ago, when they had an inexperienced offensive line, it actually improved their yards per game, improved their yards per carry, and allowed less sacks. I think he'll do just well with the offensive line, especially with the fact they go against the number 1 defensive line in the country every day in practice. That means when they step on the field on Saturday, the competition level actually drops off. So keeping Braxton Miller is probably the key to Ohio State going to the table unbeaten. Their toughest test, November 8th at Michigan State, the game that probably determines the Big Ten title overall and a berth in the playoffs.
We're talking with college football insider Phil Steele here on Downtown. You've got Oklahoma at number 4. We know they've got a great defense, but also it looks like they've got a pretty favorable road schedule this year, too. That has to help.
Yeah, and here's the amazing thing with this, Rich. When I was looking at the teams, and I try to avoid having any type of prejudice heading into the upcoming season for any of the teams out there. But when I watched Oklahoma beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, the first thought that popped in my head was, here's a team that has this returning talent, and had they lost to Alabama, they'd probably be number 20 in the country heading into this season. Yet, with the same exact talent that they put on the field, or would have on the field, since they beat Alabama, they're going to be in the top 5. well, I want to pick against these guys. I want to go against the grain. Pick them third in the Big 12. They're going to be overrated. But when I went through that talent that they have on the roster, remember they had the number one defense in the Big 12 last year. They got 9 starters back. They now have an experienced veteran quarterback. I'm not expecting their QB to look like he did against Alabama, but I think last year they had unusually poor quarterback play, and I think they'll get stronger QB play this year out of Trevor Knight. And then you factor in the schedule. They have a grand total of 1 road team that had a winning record last year, that being Texas Tech. Yeah, I've got Oklahoma favored in all their games, and I still had to pick them to win the Big 12, even though I probably had a little bit going against them heading into the magazine writing process.
Phil, outside the top 20, Charlie Strong making some headlines, changing things up down at Texas. Can he get them back to being a contender on the national scene as soon as this year, or will it take a little more time?
I don't think they can be a contender on the national scene this year. Now, what he's doing right now is eliminating some players from the program, which I love it when a coach does that. It's a my way or the highway approach. The guys that stay buy into the program. But right now, they took some attrition at the running back spot. Joe Bergeron, Jalen Overstreet, Kevin Short are all gone. They've got Malcolm Brown back, but he's usually banged up during the year. Jonathan Gray's coming off an injury. He's not even 100% right now. And after that, they've got maybe a Donald Catalon, who's a true freshman running back. So they're very thin at the running back core. There's question marks at quarterback. Can David Ash step up and do it? Can Tyrone Swoops do it? Or maybe it'll be Gerard Hurd, who, by the way, is a Charlie Strong recruit. But defensively, they've got talent. I think Strong had to feel a little bit like a kid in a candy store inheriting the talent he has on defense. But overall, I think Texas is a good team, potential 9-win team this year, but I don't see them as a national title contender this season.
Phil, nobody breaks down the schedules better than you do. As you look ahead to the coming season, what's the game of the year? What's the one you're most excited about?
I'll give you a couple of games of the year, and a lot of them happen November the 8th. How about Ohio State at Michigan State? That's a game that determines the Big Ten title, and Ohio State's got to do it on the road. Go to the Big 12, also on November 8th. Baylor at Oklahoma. Baylor's got the best offense in the Big 12, will be favored in all their other 11 games. Oklahoma's got the best defense in the Big 12, will be favored in all 12 games. Baylor did crush Oklahoma last year. That game's on November 8th. And then, while you're talking about November 8th, if you follow college football, Alabama, LSU. For 2 straight years, it was the game of the year. LSU's not up there on the radar right now, but it is Alabama's toughest test. It's on the road, and LSU's got some talented true freshmen that'll all have about 8 games experience under their belt. That game's on November 8th. So my key day of the football season is November 8th. You might have the SEC, Big 10, and Big 12 all decided on that day.
Now, we keep an eye, of course, on the FCS ranks here in Maine. Can North Dakota State bring it back and get a 4th title? They graduated a lot of guys, had a coaching change, and if not, who might be their biggest challenger at that level this year?
Yeah, and that's going to be the big question. I know when I talked to Coach Bowl this year at Wyoming, I have great respect for the job he did with North Dakota State and getting them to 3 straight national titles. I saw that the recent poll came out. They put North Dakota State number 1, and how can you not? This team has won 3 straight titles. As you mentioned, they suffered some serious attrition from the past year, and they lose their head coach. But I think they do have to be the favorites coming into the season. But really, I think if you're another FCS team out there, you have to feel it's wide open with the losses North Dakota State has had this offseason.
And that was college football expert Phil Steele on Downtown talking about the beginning of the college football season, which will be here before you know it. Just a couple short weeks away from the Black Bears getting underway against Norfolk State, and also every other team in the college football field getting ready and back on the gridiron for games that actually matter instead of battling each other for the next couple of weeks. But it's going to be fun, and thanks again to Phil Steele for taking some time to preview the early parts of the college football season. This is the Best of Downtown here for the 10th day of August, 2014. Glad to have you alongside for this edition of the program. We'll take another break here. When we come back on the show, we'll talk with our good friend Rob Bradford of WEEI.com, talk about the Red Sox and where they may go for the rest of the season, as it's, again, a lost one, but still a lot to look forward to with this edition of the 2014 Boston Red Sox. So we'll check in with Rob Bradford after the break here as you're listening to the Best of Downtown, Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
Back on the Best of Downtown for your Sunday morning, 10th day of August. 92.9 The Ticket, 92.9theticket.com. Follow the program on Twitter at Downtown Rich K, and, of course, we're on Facebook at Downtown with Rich Kimball. Friday, we talked a little Red Sox. Rob Bradford of WEEI joined us from out in Anaheim, where the Red Sox are, of course, playing the Angels, and talked, among other things, about his article about former Red Sox outfielder Carl Crawford.
Yeah. I guess this is. I guess the news to me isn't so much that Carl Crawford didn't like playing in Boston. I think that was pretty well documented. I showed up a day early to Anaheim, and the Dodgers were in town, and I saw Carl, and I wanted to catch up with him. And one of the things I found interesting was that a guy like John Lester loves playing in Boston. He said this is a place that, if all things considered works out, that he wants to play. And Mike Lowell, I talked to him earlier in the week. He said the same thing. He took a year less. Then you have Carl Crawford, who, as we know, did not like playing in Boston. So I kind of wanted to get his take on their point of view, and that just kind of set him off, and he went down that road. And really, I think one of the most interesting things that he said was that he really regrets not doing more research before coming to Boston. He said it took 5 minutes to make the decision to come to Boston, but he didn't call anybody. He didn't really research the situation, and that's amazing considering that the life-changing decision that you were making, the 7-year, $142 million contract.
Well, and how much research do you need to do to know that it's a different atmosphere in Boston than it is in Tampa Bay?
Yeah, well, that's what he said. He said that every time I played there, played in Boston, it looked great. I looked across the field, looked like they had everything together. So that's exactly what he was basing it on, that he had been there plenty of times. He thought he knew what was going on. And for right or wrong, it was a lot different than he thought. And it was, I said this before, I think Carl's a nice guy, but I've never seen a person affected by his surroundings in professional sports like Carl was in Boston. And, so it's, and that obviously has not diminished at all.
Well, conversely, John Lester continues to say all the right things about his time in Boston, and at least leads some fans to believe that there's a chance he might come back next year. Do you see that as any kind of a realistic possibility?
I think it could happen, but there's two things that have to happen. Number one, that one team just can't come in and just blow everyone out of the water. In other words, if a team comes in and says, here's 7 years, and that's going to be tough to turn down. Because the second thing is that the Red Sox have to come up past 4 years and break the philosophy that they had been espousing for all this time. So those two things have to happen. Now, I do think that if the top offer lands somewhere at 6 and the Red Sox come in at 5, I think that there's a really good chance that Lester comes back. But if he keeps pitching like this and you get close to the free agent market, that 7-year just blow you out of the water type of offer is around the corner. And if that's the case, I don't know if the Red Sox get in on that.
We're talking with Rob Bradford, WEEI in Boston. He's out in Anaheim for the opener of tonight's series with the Angels. It'll be Alan Webster tonight against Jared Weaver. It's been a week now since the trade deadline. Has anybody distinguished themselves among the youngsters in this new Red Sox world?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't know if anyone has. It's been a short amount of time. I think Xander Bogaerts is a lot more comfortable playing short, and as is the case with a couple guys, these 2 months are important for him. He has to show that he can be the shortstop they can lean on heading into next year. So I think that he's looked pretty comfortable. Other than that, I can't really say anyone's really jumped out. None of the pitchers have changed any perception. I don't think Jackie Bradley really hasn't got going offensively, and that's a curious one heading into next year, heading into the last 2 months. And then you have Will Middlebrooks at third. I think that was the other important one, and really we haven't been able to form any sort of opinion, certainly off the last week, of saying he is this or he is that. There's a ways to go here, and I do think that these last 2 months are going to be very important to make some of these decisions, because you just can't go into next year with the same sort of question marks that are looming over the team right now.
Been a lot of talk about Alan Craig. Obviously, he was not putting up the kind of numbers he usually does, but did they get caught unawares at all in taking on a guy with maybe bigger issues health-wise than they thought?
No, I think they were aware of it. It will be interesting because this ankle thing, you have to make sure that you take care of it. If that means sit out an extended period of time here the next couple of months, so be it. You have to get this guy healthy. Now, whether that ankle was an issue in making his production dip, we don't know. But it is baffling that you have a guy who was so good just drop down like he has this year. And so I actually like that trade because I like the potential that you get in Alan Craig, and I like the potential you get in Tommy Kelly. So we have to kind of wait and see. But the most important thing is to get this guy healthy because I think that when he's healthy, he's proven to be a pretty good hitter.
And that was Rob Bradford of WEEI.com talking about the Boston Red Sox and some of their struggles as of late and also the new look nature of the Red Sox post the July 31st trading deadline. Again, a lost season for the Sox, but still a lot of optimism, I think, moving forward to the 2015 season and seeing what some of these younger guys can do for the rest of August and September of the 2014 season. We'll take another break here on the Best of Downtown show. On the other side, we'll talk a little bit more football, this time more NFL focus with Vinnie Iyer of the Sporting News as he'll talk about the training camps for all 30 teams. And we'll also get some early football season storylines. How may the Patriots be this year? We'll talk to him about that and much more. As you're listening to the Best of Downtown here for the 10th day of August 2014 here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
Back on the Best of Downtown for your Sunday morning, a previously recorded edition of the show. Rich Kimball, Brian Stackpole with you, 92.9 The Ticket and 92.9theticket.com. Getting ready for the upcoming NFL season, and we talked with our friend Vinnie Iyer of the Sporting News this week and caught up with him initially about last weekend's Hall of Fame induction and the Hall of Fame game.
Yeah, you look at the headliners there with Derek Brooks and Michael Strahan, starting to make us feel a little older everywhere. You know, those guys are already in the Hall of Fame. So, yeah, I mean, you look at them, definitely 90s defense, right up there with some of the greats. We know Ray Lewis is around the corner to join them there. So next year should be fun as well. I think you're looking at Kurt Warner, maybe Jerome Bettis, maybe Marvin Harrison, guys like that. So, yeah, these guys that started in the 90s, it's hard to think they're already going into Canton, but it's true.
Absolutely. It goes fast. Well, as a Giants fan, I enjoyed them getting the win in the Hall of Fame game, but that's balanced with the really sad news today about David Wilson, who looks like his career may be in jeopardy.
Yeah, you don't want to take any chances with the neck, and that's the first thing they got to think about. He's 23 years old, still a very young guy. For when he came to the league, he was the youngest player in the league then. So he's got a long life ahead of him, and you can't risk this with football and neck and everything that can come with it, the worst-case scenarios with that. So it's a sad story because there were so many big things that they were hoping they could get out of him with his speed over his career, and unfortunately it's never really gotten going either. So what could have been with him, that's just the way the NFL can work. Bad break for a guy like that.
Some big contract news today in the NFL as the Bengals sign Andy Dalton to a brand new deal. Is he underrated by people, or did the Bengals perhaps overpay a little bit?
I think the Bengals paid as well as they could because it makes them happy, it makes him happy. They didn't have to overpay, yet he feels like there's an opportunity with his play to earn all that money. So I think they paid probably right about the market value for what he's worth. It's very complicated these days with whatever you want to call it, escalators, de-escalators, incentives, everything they throw in there. It takes several scientists to figure out how much a player is really getting paid. But overall, I think you look at the potential $16 million a season. That's his maximum there. That's about right, and I think it's in line with a lot of quarterbacks that accomplish what he's done and not had the playoff success yet. But the Bengals paying him are hoping they'll have that success too.
The other big quarterback news of the day, Johnny Manziel taking reps with the Ones in Cleveland. That doesn't really come as a big surprise to anybody.
No, they have to look at all angles of this battle. I think we assumed Brian Hoyer was ahead and ahead to stay, and he still manned up there in week 1, but they didn't draft Johnny Manziel, the number 22 pick, just to say he's going to sit for sure. They need to see what they have here. They know Brian Hoyer. They've got to pay him. He's a free agent, so they got to figure this out now. So no matter who starts in week 1, I think Manziel will get his opportunity to play a lot as a rookie. So they're just seeing how ready he is and how much he can handle. And the games, I think when they come around, we'll see Johnny Manziel's best. I think he's just that type of a player.
What do you think is the biggest challenge he'll face, Vinnie?
I think the biggest challenge, I don't think actually the pressure and scrutiny, I don't think that gets to him as much. I mean, he's used to being under the microscope now for almost 2-3 years since he burst on the scene at Texas A&M. I think for him, it's just that playbook, and he's said it over and over again. He's not really battling Brian Hoyer. He's battling to try to get everything done with the playbook because it's a big transition from what he used to do in college. And I think there's some of that in the dirt playground style in him, but he's got to do it within the Brown system.
Now, a few quarterbacks get disrespected in the league as much as Jay Cutler, but as you wrote recently, it's not out of the question to think this guy could be an NFL MVP this year, especially when you look at two of the best receivers in the league out there as targets.
Yeah, I think everything was lined up for him. The only thing that didn't happen last year was him staying healthy and really getting used to that offense where you feel a little bit better about him. I mean, that potential is there. Talent-wise, he's an underrated athlete. He's got a cannon of an arm, can hit a barn with anything. But it's always been the head and other injuries that have, I think the head is more just mental. It's physical elsewhere. If you can put it all together, there is that potential. We don't know if he'll ever reach it, but he's one of those players that he's going to do everything great with that talent or just completely bust out. And I think it's getting to a point where it's a little bit make or break if he's ever going to get to that elite level.
Here in New England, a lot of buzz about the Patriots' defense this year, especially with the addition of Darrelle Revis. Does this make them even more of a Super Bowl contender? And is he maybe the most significant offseason acquisition anybody had in the league?
Yeah, he's right up there with anybody acquiring anyone at this point. I think maybe if you look at Denver and what they did, unfortunately, when you look at the AFC picture, that they try to keep up there with getting Talib from the Patriots and T.J. Ward and Emmanuel Sanders as well, and DeMarcus Ware. So they had quite the haul. That's what it's going to come down to. The Patriots are going to win the AFC East. Everybody knows that. They're going to be in a high position, either 1, 2, or 3 seed in the conference. So it really comes down to the Denver game. Can they overcome what they struggled through last year? Really didn't play well in that playoff game. So you're looking at Denver, Indianapolis, New England. These teams all have easy tickets to the playoffs. It's now about what they do when they get there with their quarterbacks.
That was Vinnie Iyer of the Sporting News talking about the NFL season. Training camp underway. Of course, the first preseason game for almost every team is in the books already. The Patriots will be playing again in their second edition of their preseason contest, this time a home game against the Philadelphia Eagles next Friday. Pre-game coverage will start at 4:30, so there'll be no downtown show that day. But again, great Patriots coverage, 3 hours of pregame coverage, and then a significant postgame show afterwards, too. So if you need your football fix, and specifically Patriots football fix, then stay tuned to Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket for all the pertinent information. Again, a little quick programming note about the downtown show coming up for this week. No show Friday, as I mentioned, but also a little bit of a abbreviated edition of Downtown moving forward. Monday through Thursday will be on from 4 to 5 p.m., due to broadcasts of the Senior League World Series, which will be being played at Mansfield Stadium here in Bangor. So with that in mind, we will have shows. We'll have 4 hours of programming for you, but we'll jam-packed a lot of great guests, a lot of great information in those 4 hours starting on Monday afternoon. We'll take another break here on the Best of Downtown. When we do come back, we'll talk with Eric Frede, one of our good friends, formerly here in this area, but has since moved on to bigger and better things at Comcast Sportsnet New England. We'll talk, of course, Cape Cod League Baseball, the Red Sox, and much more with Eric when we come back from the break. You're listening to the Best of Downtown here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
There's always something going down at the Down Under Club, located at 427 Main Street, downtown Bangor, under Seasons Grill and Lounge. The Down Under has karaoke every Tuesday, and on the weekends, it's wall-to-wall party people dancing the night away to live bands until 1 a.m. A $5 cover charge gets you the best drink specials in town, and the Down Under is a great place to stop after your event at the Waterfront or Cross Center, which is located conveniently just 2 blocks away. Find them on Facebook or call 992-2250 to get information on these special events, including their sold-out comedy nights. So come enjoy the thunder at the Down Under.
Back here on the Best of Downtown for your Sunday morning. Had a chance to talk this week with our good friend Eric Frede of Comcast Sportsnet New England. Always kid him about being the hardest working guy in New England sports. Even though he just come back from a European vacation, he also spent a lot of time this summer covering Cape Cod League baseball. And we began our conversation with Eric talking about just that.
You know, I love it. I've been doing it for a few years. It started off just by doing the All-Star game each year, which was always kind of tough because you just kind of jump in and you have a love for baseball and you keep track of guys, but it's so hard because you've got guys coming from all over the country. I mean, as everybody knows, the best college baseball summer league there is. The last couple of years for Fox College Sports, they've done a fuller schedule, so we've been able to get down there on a regular basis, 8-game, 9-game schedule, and really get to know the guys a little bit. And it's a lot of fun. We just wrapped up our season this past week. Their playoffs begin tomorrow night after a little bit of rain. Spent some time. The Chatham coach is John Schiffner, and he's going to be coming up and assisting with the main program. And he was thrilled about that, to get a chance to go up there and work in Orono. And you're getting a good guy up there to help out that story program. So I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and I look forward. I'm always look forward to the next year and getting to spend some summer days on the Cape. A
nice connection, too, to the state of Maine, especially UMaine baseball in the Cape League. The Armstrong boys, who were playing for Yarmouth Dennis, their dad, Mark, was a catcher for John Winkin at the University of Maine.
You know, there are so many connections, and I'm partial to the New England stories because you get so many guys who come in from Arizona or Arizona State or UCLA or LSU, you look around, we have a bunch of UVA guys this year, a couple of Vanderbilt kids, just, you know, after the College World Series ended. But I'm always partial, and I always look for the guys who have any sort of connection to New England or the Northeast, because as we all know, and as we learned very well from Coach Winkin, you got to work a lot harder to make it to the Division I level with a short short summer, I should say, and a long winter like we have. And I always appreciate those Northeast kids. And I give them a little bit more love on those Cape League telecasts than those pretty boys from the South and out West.
So now, after watching Cape League baseball, now you have to take a step down and watch the 2014 Red Sox.
You know, it's been a little bit of a struggle. There's no question about it. I think the whole purging at the trade deadline was necessary. It was good. We saw just a lot of evidence that it was just a lost season from the start. And there's always that World Series hangover. And I'm definitely in that camp of not dismissing a World Series championship. There seems to be so much chatter about people about the fact that the Red Sox haven't been consistently good year in and year out. And World Series count for a little bit more than just a season that, you had 95 wins or something like that. I think we can all agree to that, but I hear so many people just kind of dismissing the World Series. And think about where we were 10 years ago at this time. Even though Veritek had put the glove in A-Rod's face, we still had no idea what was to come. So I think it was a bold move by Ben Cherington. He cannot be done because we see that there's no way that this team could have any success if Clay Buchholz is the top of a rotation guy. That's one thing we're finding out pretty quickly here, and they'll continue to discover over these next couple of months. So that will be the big project and process going forward after the season, is who are going to be your top two starters, because they're not on the Major League club right now.
We're talking with Eric Frede, Comcast Sportsnet New England. Yesterday we had Mike Hurley from CBS Boston and the Sports Hub on the show. He had a great column today in response to a guy in St. Louis who kind of said, well, the Red Sox are okay, but they haven't been able to be consistent winners the way the Cardinals have been. And then Mike pointed out, the Red Sox beat the Cardinals in the World Series, not only last year, but the previous time they were there too.
I think you and I are in the same boat on this. Why else, do you want to have those days where the famous Dan Duquette quote, we spent more days in first place than anybody else. Yeah, but where were you at the end of October?
Right.
You were not spraying champagne in the clubhouse and lifting up a World Series trophy. And I think that is everything. And that's how far this franchise has come over this last 10 years. Yeah, the Valentine year was terrible. This year has been awful, but I'll take it when you look at what happened in 04, 07, and last year. I mean, and sometimes you got to take a step back like Cherington did at the trade deadline. Like, okay, we're getting rid of Lackey, we're getting rid of Lester, and we've got to start shaping for next year right now. And that's something that just had to be done. Now, if you take a bigger step back, I don't agree with how they handled John Lester. I still think he's got a lot of miles left. I know what happens when you get to be 30 years old, and a guy who, like Lester, has thrown a lot of innings. He's been through a lot, but as we've seen, Rich, not everybody can perform with the spotlight and the way it shines in Boston. Lester is a guy who can do it. Lester is a guy who delivered in the postseason more than once, and to me, that's going to be a big issue because not everybody can pitch or play in Boston. Lester's one of those guys. They lowballed him. I don't think there's any chance he's going to come back after the season. It's all sweet and nice that the Red Sox can float out there that, well, they're interested in bringing him back, and Lester says, I'm going to keep the door open. Lester played the PR game perfectly, but I don't think there's any way the Red Sox will bring him back or are committed to that kind of money to bring him back, or they would have done it already. So that's the one unfortunate thing to me.
I agree with you completely on that, and I'm fascinated by fans who buy into everything that's happened, and maybe it's good that they have so much faith in management, but who really believe that this is all part of an incredibly well-orchestrated event by Ben Cherington to lowball Lester, let him go to Oakland, get Cespedes, and then have Lester re-sign. And I think that's a fairy tale. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is coming from Cherington or if this is coming from Lucchino. I would think it's more the latter than the former, where Cherington recognizes the value of Lester, and you want a guy, a number one, a proven top-of-the-rotation guy. But two things Lester always talked about, I think the Red Sox tried to use against him. One was how he would say over and over again, I like it here. This is the only place I've pitched in, and this is the only place I know. I think maybe they were thinking, well, he's not going to go anywhere else. Well, you just trade him somewhere else. He's going to see what Oakland's like in the pennant race. Now, Oakland may be a backwater location compared to Boston in our eyes, but you go on a World Series run, and all of a sudden you've got all these other teams, most notably the Yankees, who are going to throw crazy money at Lester because they need pitching. That's going to work against the Red Sox. And it seemed like Lester was willing to take a hometown discount, and that worked against the Red Sox because they lowballed them. There's no question about it. And thankfully, Lester's representatives in his defense would say, you know what, no, that's not the market value for you. Let's wait and let's see. And that backfired on the Sox. So I don't think they handled that well. I'm fine with the return on Lackey. I want to see a little bit more of what the return is for Lester, but the fact they got a little bit of a power bat here, I'm intrigued by it because they need to work on that. And again, I think Cherington, you win a World Series, you get that benefit of the doubt with me, Rich, that okay, you have other things lined up on your board that nobody else can see. Are you making a move? Are you lining all your chips up to get Stanton? And then all of a sudden you've got power in both corners of the outfield. I don't know. I want to see what happens, but the pitching thing concerns me. There's no doubt because you're not going to win a bidding war with the Yankees. It's apparent with how the Red Sox went about going and dealing with Lester.
And that was Eric Frede of Comcast Sportsnet New England talking some Boston sports, Cape Cod League baseball, Red Sox, and so much more. Always enjoy talking with Eric Frede, one of the best in the business. And as Rich mentioned, every time he comes on the program, might be one of the hardest working men in New England in the sports media business. So we thank Eric for his time last week talking some sports, as we're doing so as well here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket with the best of downtown, which reminds me, we got one last break coming up. On the other side, though, we'll preview what's to come for the regular weekday edition of Downtown with Rich Kimball. A little abbreviated schedule this week. We'll give you a little detail on that and what's also to come on Monday. spoiler alert, some great fantasy baseball and football talk with Ray Flowers. With that and much more when we come back from the break here on Sports Radio 92.9.
Getting set to put the wraps on this week's Best of Downtown. Thanks to everybody on the show today. Bob Ryan of the Boston Globe, college football insider Phil Steele, WEEI's Rob Bradford, Vinnie Iyer of the Sporting News, and Comcast Sportsnet New England's Eric Frede. Don't forget Senior Little League Baseball at high noon today as Bangor takes on Canada. Dale Duff, Clem Labrie, the morning pitch tomorrow at 6 a.m. And, of course, we're with you for an abbreviated Downtown tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. We'll talk with Sirius XM Radio's fantasy expert, Ray Flowers, plus Alan Adams of the Main Edge and more. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you tomorrow afternoon at 4 for Downtown right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
Always go downtown.